A sequence is the edited assembly of your footage. In Final Cut Pro, it can be as long as 12 hours, or as short as a few frames. In Project 2A, hit Command-N to open a new sequence. Double-click to open it. A tab opens in both the canvas and in the timeline. If you change tabs in one window, the tab changes in the other. Both display the active sequence, but in different ways. The canvas monitors the final output of your edited sequence, while the timeline is a graphical representation of all the elements used to build it. Every sequence carries with it crucial technical information, which you can view or alter by going to Sequence, Settings, or use the shortcut Command-0. So where did all this information come from? From your Easy Setup. As we can see, ours is set to DVNTSC with its standard frame rate of 29.97 frames per second. Hit Cancel to close sequence settings. Once you've marked ins and outs for a clip in the viewer, just drag it into the timeline. We get a warning. That's because this is the first clip we're adding to the sequence, and it's a 24 frames per second 640 by 360 clip, which conflicts with our DV Easy setup. Final Cut gives us a choice. Do we want to work in the clip's native resolution, or do we want the clip to scale to our Easy setup? Let's hit Yes to change the sequence settings. If you hit Command-0 now to open sequence settings, you'll find that Final Cut has changed the resolution, frame rate, and codec of the sequence to match our clip. Hit Cancel to close. The clip appears as a bar in the timeline, which we can move, lengthen, or shorten. And we see the actual picture in the canvas. The layout of controls in the canvas is almost identical to that in the viewer. But note that the current timecode field in the canvas refers to the sequence timecode, while the viewer clocks the camera timecode of each individual clip. In the browser, double-click the sequence Fight version 1. All playback controls and shortcuts you learned in the viewer work in the canvas and timeline as well. Notice that the playhead of the timeline is in sync with the canvas playhead. Try scrubbing on the timeline ruler. The playhead moves in the scrubber bar in the canvas. Just as you set ins and outs for clips in the viewer, you can set sequence ins and outs in the canvas and the timeline. This is useful for exporting only a portion of your sequence and for creating playback loops. To set up our loop points, let's enter timecode values to move the playhead. You don't even need to click in the timecode field. Type 500 and hit Return. The playhead jumps to 5 seconds into the sequence. Hit the I key. See the sequence in mark in the timeline ruler? Now type +200 and hit Return. The playhead lands on 7 seconds. It didn't go to 2 seconds because the plus sign told Final Cut that we wanted to move 2 seconds forward relative to the current playhead position. Hit the O key to mark an out. Now hit the Play In to Out button in the canvas. The marked region plays, but doesn't loop. Turn looping on by going to the View menu and selecting Loop, or use the shortcut Ctrl-L. Now hit the Play In to Out button in the canvas. Hit Ctrl-L again to turn looping off. Now hit Option X to clear the sequence in and out points. You can also clear these ins and outs in the Mark menu, and by control-clicking either the scrubber bar in the canvas or the timeline ruler. So after looping them, say we want to zoom in on those clips in the timeline to fine-tune them. Drag around them to select them. Now hit Shift-Option-Z to fit your selection to the window. When we're done and want to look at the whole sequence again, hit Shift-Z to fit the whole sequence to the window. Here's a case where a shortcut behaves differently depending on which window is active. First, go to the canvas and in the Zoom pop-up, select 200%. Now, use Shift-Z to fit the picture back into the window. You can select the Zoom tool in the tool palette, or select it by hitting the Z key for a familiar magnifying glass zoom cursor. Click on the timeline to zoom in. Hold the Option key and click to zoom out. Hit the A key to get back to the selection tool. Now, click the timeline background so that no clips are selected, and hit Command+ to zoom in. Then, Command- to zoom out. The zoom was centered around the position of the playhead. Click in the timeline ruler to place the playhead near the end of the sequence. Now, select the second clip. Now hit Command+ a few times. Because a clip was selected, the playhead position was ignored and the zoom was anchored by the selected clip. All of these zoom techniques work in the viewer and the canvas, depending on which one is active, but they have no effect on the browser. Hit Shift-Z and click on the viewer to make it active. Now hit Option+. The Option key directs the zoom command to the timeline, no matter which window is active. Now hit Option- to zoom out. You can also zoom with the slider in the horizontal scroll bar. Grab in the middle to scroll, and grab an end to zoom. Drag toward the center to zoom in, and drag outward to zoom out. Use the track height controls to change the vertical size of the tracks. Grab the divider to reposition the timeline relative to the window. Use the horizontal scroll bars if a track drifts out of view. You know how to mark your clips and get them into a sequence. Before we actually start editing, we need to learn one more crucial thing: how to get your footage from your camera or deck inside Final Cut Pro.